My name is Tim Smith, and I'm the historian here at the Adams County Historical Society. And our presentation today is going to be about motels. Now, in the caption, and of course, I came with this title, when I was planning the program. But basically, I'm going to talk about the motels in Gettysburg. I had campgrounds in it originally, but you'll see it's too many slides, and so I had to get rid of the campgrounds. There'll have to be another presentation. But the motels and the campgrounds tie really well into this subject. So you probably know that after the battle was fought here, Gettysburg enjoyed heavy visitation immediately. Since the time of the battle, there was never a time when there was a lull in our heavy visitation. And hotels sprung up as a direct result of the battle. I just found this drawing the other day, so I'm highlighting it here just because I didn't have it in any of my programs before, and I just found it. But I think it's from 1879. But this is the Springs Hotel, built directly on the first day's battlefield, and it opened for business in 1869. So this is an 1879 advertisement of it. Now, there were places to stay in Gettysburg at the time of the battle, and prior to the time of the battle, we had hotels. This is the McClellan House, which, of course, today is the location of the Hotel Gettysburg in the square of Gettysburg. And, these hotels that were here prior to the Civil War were rebuilt and refurbished over the years to handle the heavy visitation that came into Gettysburg after the battle. Now, most of the visitors came in by train. And, in 1884, the Gettysburg-Harrisburg Railroad was placed in. And you might know that tourist railroad on that line is opening here later this month. You're looking for John. He's up here in the front. But around 1903, vehicles started to become very popular amongst tourists. And early on, I don't know how many people were aware of this, you couldn't leave the car outside. It couldn't get rained on. It would have some serious issues if it got rained on. And so they had to have garages. And early on, there was a bunch of these garages that opened up, like large areas where they had parking inside so you could keep your car protected. But as time went by, vehicles improved. Here's another large hotel in town, the Eagle Hotel. It catered exclusively to tourists early on. But a lot of these hotels, they didn't have parking at their hotel for vehicles, people driving in, So with the popularity of the automobile, it became, necessary for garages to open up or places for people to park exist on the streets. And that was, that's a problem in Gettysburg, obviously. The Hoffman Hotel, I like this postcard I put in here because you see the object of thousands of tourists. And Hoffman's was on York Street, basically where today it would be Gallery 30, across from the pizza place right there. But that Hoffman's burned down in a fire in 1960, 1962, somewhere around there. And it is there at the time of the battle. It's basically the Globe Hotel or Globe Inn. Now, you probably know that Gettysburg has 10 roads that lead into it from all the other towns in the area. And so, naturally, motels, when they started to spout up, would spout up along these roads leading into the town and not necessarily in the town. Because I think, I'll talk about it in a second, but the emphasis of the hotel is for you to be able to park your car. And so we need parking. And so not a lot of motels are in the town. They're outside of the town on the roads that lead into it. And one other thing about what I noticed is there's a large amount of motels on certain roads, and other roads don't seem to have motels on them at all. And it might be a function of the zoning or the rules of the various townships. Like I noticed that Mount Joy Township doesn't seem to have motels during the motel craze. And I really don't know why they could. I mean, the area is there and the area is open. So perhaps they were harsher on, the permitting or the building of motels at that time period. And again, I have here's a modern map of Gettysburg. And so the road system that led into the town also would bring tourists into the area. And basically, by the 1920s, people were traveling in their car from place to place on vacation. So instead of getting on a train and going to a spot and staying there for a week, you could put your family in your car and you could drive across the state of Pennsylvania, spend the night at a location, drive to another spot and spend a night at a location. And so the difference that we're talking about between motels and what are hotels and what would become motels and campgrounds and tourist camps or tourist parks or motor lodges is that they were designed primarily for you to spend a night. One night. You could spend a few nights at a location, but they're for overnight travelers. And this article is from the Gettysburg newspaper in 1925. And you can see that Gettysburg is enjoying great visitation, and all of a sudden, people, more than 200 cars being parked at public and private camps on ordinary nights. And it mentions in the end that some of the amenities that they would have at these tourist camps, basically what people need is a place to just pull their car over and spend the night in their car, So, or the kids maybe sleep with a blanket on the ground next to the car. So we're talking about maybe they need a fire ring. Maybe there's a place where there's an organized, bath or stove or some running water for the larger campsites. Hotels hated this. And garages, come on. And the state of Pennsylvania was providing places for people to pull over and park for free. And a lot of these places became state parks. And, so people are losing money. Of course, you're only going to stay outside in the summer or the spring, the summer, and early fall. So in the winter, it's still good. But it's fascinating that the evolution of these motels will start as tourist camps, and that's what they're referred to as, tourist camps. And to give you an idea of some of the early tourist camps, I love this. This is 1924, I believe. So a year before that article about the tourist camps. And one of the biggest in our area was Natural Springs Park, which today is the Giant grocery store. So think about this. When you go up to the Giant grocery store and you're there at that site, that was during Juba Early's raid on June 26, Gordon's brigade camped there. And after the Battle of Gettysburg, that was the field hospital, Camp Letterman. And in the 1920s, it became a place where people drove up into a field and parked their cars. And the office was a gas station. And you'll notice that these tourist camps a lot of times revolve around a gas station. Does that make sense? With a mechanic. You can imagine, I think about it all the time. I don't know about you guys, but My car in the 70s broke down all the time. I was always climbing under it and wiring the muffler back on. I don't think cars don't break down as much now as they used to. And I'm sure it was worse early on with cars breaking down. So a tourist camp would be a place near the battlefield that you would camp at, but also would have a garage. Now, this building still stands. Do you guys recognize it? Okay, very good. It's right where they sell the Trump T-shirts. But it's a rental home now, and I think there's a bunch of different units in it. But it's right across from the entrance to the giant grocery store plaza. Also, I was going to put it in here, but I didn't. Every weekend they had bands playing at a bandstand there. And someone who their grandfather or something owned it gave us like pictures of bands that played there that they put on the bulletin board. And we must have like 40 or 50 8x10 photographs of these various bands that played at this site. My favorite thing, of course, is called Natural Springs Park. But when they opened it up, they had a contest to decide what the name of the new outdoor amusement center would be. And Natural Springs Park won. And that's why it's called Natural Springs Road, in case you didn't know that. Okay. So another very popular spot where there was one was on the Steinway Avenue, the Emmitsburg Road, and it was a tourist camp. Green Gables Service Station and Tourist Camp. Again, a gas station with a big field behind it. And this today is still a place where people stay. This is the Quality Inn on Steinway Avenue. Or I think I have something coming up on it later. But you see the Welcome to Gettysburg sign. You got to have that, right? Drive safely. But you can see that they provided. There's also, before the annex, the Soldiers National Cemetery is located there. There was a tourist camp at that location also. You might know, if you go today to the Quality Inn, you might know Paul Witt. His father owned that after it was the Green Gables and actually built the motel at that site. But they have a wayside exhibit that talks about the fact that the Green Gables started there in 1938 as a tourist camp. And then, 1956, the Witts bought it, replaced the cabins with the Gettysburg Motor Lodge. So at first, these were just fields that you pulled into. Maybe there was like a fire ring, like a campground. And then they started to provide individual amenities to visitors, such as cabins. And that was a whole new ball game to provide the cabins. Here's a postcard of Marsh Creek Park. And this still looks kind of like it did. And you might have ridden by it a few times and looked down and say, what are they doing down there? What is that? It's basically on the Emmitsburg Road where Marsh Creek crosses it. And if you drive south towards Emmitsburg past the barn, cafeteria, buffet, whatever it is now, and you go over the creek, look to the left, you'll see this low ground where there's some RVs parked. And basically that's how it's always been. You just drive down that road, you pay money, and you pull off and camp next to the creek there. So this is like a 1950s postcard of it. You might notice in my program, it's going to feature a lot of my postcards. Because, you want to have, I'd imagine that when you stopped in one of these tourist locations, whether it be a motel or a tourist camp or, a gift shop associated with it, you bought a postcard and then put a stamp on it and sent it to your relatives. I'm in Gettysburg. So Lee's Headquarters Museum was a free museum since the 1920s. And early on, they put in a tourist camp beside it. And you see they have cabins there at the Lee Park campground and cabins there. And I I was trying to see, I have a better photograph that shows some of the cabins, but here's an advertisement for it. Cabins with heat. How about that? Yeah, and of course they have a gas station. Ooh, city water. You want to drink good city water. To me, I'm not in the 1920s. City water doesn't seem like it would be better than like drinking water out of a well. I don't know. And then a little farther out, Route 30, we have the Shields Gettysburg Camp Park, and of course, this building was torn down like 1986. So I remember it very well, and I used to go to the museum there, and I knew some of the Shields. They were tour guides, but their father, Arthur Shields, or Ott Shields, had moved here in the 1920s, and he opened this by 1930. And so you can see the Reynolds and the Buford statue, and we're near the park, restrooms, or the West End Guide Station, we call it, and you can see the museum. But also you can see the cabins. They had cabins. The neatest thing I remember is a remnant of the Shields Park was they had a pet cemetery. And it was back by the railroad cut. And that pet cemetery was there way after they tore down the buildings. Bob, do you remember the pet cemetery? So in our program, I'm going to show you a lot of pictures of motels and tell you a little bit about them. So I hope you like motels. So this is 1957. This is an advertisement that was placed in a program that the college ran in 1957, and it basically was the Civil War Institute. So what would become the Civil War Institute was started in the 1950s, and they send out a list of their speakers in 1957 for the upcoming program, and they suggested that you stay at one of these locations, and they gave the motels and courts around Gettysburg. So I'm not going to talk in this program about hotels, and I'm not going to talk about tourist homes. And there's a lot of people that just had a room in their house opened up, and you could just stop at their house and rent a room. And that's more like what would become bed and breakfasts. They're basically the same exact thing. Don't let people tell you they're different. But these are motels. So the word motel, you might know, was invented in 1925 in the American Southwest. And it's basically the word hotel and the word motor. Because again, the emphasis of the motel is for you to spend one night because you're driving from one place to another and you're stopping. So it's a motorized hotel, the motel. Now, when I looked in our newspaper, the first official mention I could find, I put the word motel in the search engine, push Gettysburg, and it wasn't until 1945 that I saw the word motel used. And it was used to describe the tearing down of the cabins, at least some of them, at Larson's Quality Inn, and here they're putting up a row of rooms they would refer to as a motel. So I imagine the term took a while to catch up to us, and it was probably used earlier. A lot of times people don't advertise their businesses in the newspaper, so I can't always find mentions of them. But 1945 is the earliest I found in the newspaper. Now, we are just very, very fortunate because the Cleveland Motel that, started as cabins in the 1920s out, on the Harrisburg Road, several miles north of town, like 4 miles north of town, their daughter, Phyllis Cleveland, had Colonel Sheeds as her history teacher. And in 1955, I believe it was, that's what it looks like to me, it could be 54, she wrote a paper about her family's business, and she titled Motels in Adams County, and we have it here, and boy, is there a lot of really cool photographs in it. So So some of the stuff in the program I have from Phyllis Cleveland. So her family had opened up sort of a gas station, refreshment stand in 1924. And in 1928, they put up some cabins. So you can see, I guess in 1926, they built the first of the cabins. So here's the gas station and a little restaurant and a little store. And then you can see in the woods, they put up some cabins. And they put up more in 1928, 1932. And then I think it was in 1954, they tore them down and built what we consider a motel. And that motel stood there. Boy, I don't remember off the top of my head, I'm sure. I have notes here. I wrote everything down. 2003, I have it written down that it kind of went out of business. I'm trying to think when I moved. That makes sense. 2003 went out of business, and you probably know that the motel buildings have been torn down now. But there's the house. There's the house and the motels rooms. Do you remember that? Okay, it's near Shriver's Corner, up near Distal Fink, if you need a reference point. I didn't put a lot of maps. But I'm going to talk about some of the roads that have the more of the motels on them and give some thoughts on the motels in Gettysburg. And, you know, the motels really lent themselves well to our tourist industry base because people could drive in the area. There were plenty of rooms in and around Gettysburg. There was a push by the Travel Council in 1938 at the 75th anniversary to create more camp tourist parks where people could just park and camp. And then again, prior to the centennial of the Civil War, in the 1960s, there was a huge amount of motels built, and they were trying to increase the number of rooms in town so that large amounts of people could stay here. Now, I'm sure that the Travel Council and today, Destination Gettysburg would complain that people come here and leave and don't spend enough time here. So getting people to spend the night so they can do something, spend the night here, do something the next day is key to the tourist industry. Just to give you a little then and now, here's the intersection of Steinway Avenue, the Emmitsburg Road, or in the Baltimore Pike. And you can see at the time of the battle, the Wagon Hotel. This is an 1880s photograph. And then eventually that Wagon Hotel blossomed into the Battlefield Hotel, which was known far and wide for its chicken and waffles. Everybody should eat chicken and waffles. And, I have a debate with some of my friends. So what do you think? Do you want molasses on your chicken and waffles or gravy? Yeah, I like the gravy. But a lot of people put maple syrup on their waffles. And then we have postcards of the Battlefield Hotel, so you can get an idea what it looks like in the 1940s. It burned in a fire in 1949. And again, some of these places revolved around gas. Can you imagine? Where do you park for that? I guess you park up in the grassy area, where you park now near the Jenny Wade house. And then as soon as it burned down, they rebuilt a gas station at that location, which today, of course, eventually became the convenience store. But that's, I think that photograph's like 1949. So to talk about the hotels down the Emmitsburg Road, the first one you come to is White's Motel. And I don't remember if it was 1970 or 1971. It could be 1972. My family came to Gettysburg in our station wagon, and we stayed at White's Motel. White's Motel is interesting because here's the Baltimore Street side of it. It was partly on Baltimore Street, across from the Tour Center parking lot, and the other part of it, it kind of was an L-shaped, was down onto Steinway Avenue. And, you got to bear with me because I collect postcards. So I have lots and lots of postcards of the different hotels and motels. I'm getting to the point where I have all the postcards of the postcard companies of the different various battlefield scenes. So I have to go for these rare ones of all the motels in the town. But here it's getting kind of older. You probably know that it changed ownership and became part of the Heritage Motor Lodge. And then eventually the Gettysburg Tour Center bought it, and now it's the Inn on Seminary Ridge, something like that. I might not remember all the name changes of all the places. I love this place. The little restaurant there that's now currently the Hoof, Fin, and Fowl. If you want to play a game with your friends, one of my favorite games, of course maybe my friends don't like this game, is what restaurants were at this location? So we got the Jenny Wade kitchen, and then there was Tavern in the Village, Cracker Jacks, Spirit Fields, Jay's Place, the Pizza Boy, the Subway, Hoof, Fin, and Fowl. Oh, Brigades. And I'm forgetting one, maybe like the Gateway. Do you remember any of these places? You ever think about looking at a building and trying to remember all the different businesses that have come and gone in that same building? Okay, I'm getting way off the subject. So again, here's an advertisement for White's Motel. And you see it's at the junction of 15 and 140. Remember, when I was a kid, I don't know about you guys, you remember that 97 140 switched? And today 140 goes from Westminster to Emmitsburg, but that used to be 97. And 140 used to come, what confused? Whose idea was that? Yeah. So here's the Emmitsburg Road side of it, and look, there's O'Rourke's. So, or at that time, the Honorable Fujiya. Okay. The Three Crowns Motel. Do you know that was built in 1960 and is still there today with the same name? That's interesting. Obviously, it's gone through a bunch of different owners over the years. The Colton. And the Colton, I think, is, let me see. I have all the dates here on my sheet. Colton, 1954 to the present. 1954. I don't know if you've been in it lately. I don't think they've done much. But look, there's an arcade. Remember the arcade there? Very good. See, you'll like this show then. Okay, because I'm going to show you something wild in a minute. Here's bless her heart, when Phyllis Cleveland was going around, she stopped and talked to each owner of each hotel and wrote down the year they thought they started business. Some of them are wrong, but she also collected business cards from them and postcards, and we have them here in our collection. Isn't that awesome, forward thinking of her? I don't think she's alive. Excuse me if she sees this and she's still alive. I'm sorry. She lived in Michigan last I heard. She married a guy named Smith. But I got some other pictures of the Colton. Look at the nice pool they had there. You see that? One of the things about these motels, if you want to attract people, I got to tell you, when we were kids, we would not allow our parents to stop at a place that didn't have a pool. You had to have a pool. That was definitely, and so the more popular places had a pool. And there's another good, look how nice that looks. And how about this? Here's my favorite place. I don't know about you guys. Jasper's Tube Steaks. And of course, I can't tell you how many tank models I built. Gilbert's Hobby Shop. But there you go. Now, it was really built up here in the 70s. This is a photograph from the early 70s, I believe. The Howard Johnsons was a big boom for Gettysburg when it came in. And I'm thinking that's 1950. Oh, no, where is it there? 1960. So 1960. And they had, there's I don't have the postcard, but there's a colored postcard of the conceptual drawing of it. And I liked the Commander's Room. That's what the name of the bar was. And it was named after Ike. And that's one of the places around town that Mamie occasionally would go and visit. And I didn't see Mamie in there, but I saw her in the parking lot one day when she was leaving. I was coming in. So, that was a really happening place. Look at the pool there. What is this? What are they advertising this here? Yeah. And of course, Howard Johnson's had a restaurant, or as I'm sure you know, Hojo. The Gettysburg Motor Lodge, and again, this was a tourist camp, and then the Witt family took it over and built the Gettysburg Motor Lodge, which would eventually become part of the Quality Inn system. And here you can see the Quality Court sign on it. And here we're looking back down the other way, past the Colton. Remember the place that sold the tour tapes? That was I still have that tour tape. I listen to it occasionally. And I like this place, the Pennsylvania Dutch Beef House. That was right in front of where the National Park Visitor Center, the Rosenstiel Museum would be. And this is actually the sandwich sign. This is actually the building right here, the Pennsylvania Dutch Beef House. But, we have lots of stuff from the Quality Inn. I also collect brochures of motels, museums, attractions around town. I have a huge collection of brochures. And I was fortunate to be collecting them out of the racks when I was a kid. I have no idea why I did that. But if anybody has any brochures from Gettysburg that they don't want anymore and want to go to a good home, you're welcome to donate them to us. Okay. Where in the future somebody can learn about all this stuff if we don't preserve it? Like, it's the history of commercialism. So the Home Sweet Home Motel, I knew Bob Fair, and his aunt had run it early on. I'm not sure when his aunt and uncle took it over, but I think they had cabins there. I'll show you in the 1920s. Bob Fair was a tour guide. Duffy, he was better known as. And he lived in a mobile home that was set up here on the property for a long time. But you probably remember the Home Sweet Home. Like, again, it started as cabins in the 1920s. And this photograph is from Phyllis Cleveland. So she got some of the owners of the business to stand in front of their businesses and get their photographs taken. And here's a good, that soda machine, I think it was still there when they tore it down, I think. It was a crazy old. Let's see, when did they tear it down? 2002, I have that the park and the foundation, I guess, purchased it. I guess it was the friends and the park and had taken it down. And it's right next to General Pickett's all-you-can-eat Battlefield Buffet, which was the Battlefield cafeteria at that time. So you can kind of see where it is there. I don't know why I put the sign in. Then we go down the road a little bit. And one thing I wanted to mention is you don't realize how much the Emmitsburg Road was filled with these businesses all along the main part of what is now the battlefield. And early on, I shouldn't say early on, but this ground was developed. And it was basically in the 1970s through the 1990s that the Park Service bore the onus of purchasing a lot of this commercial property and removing it from the battlefield and restoring it to its Civil War appearance. So now, of course, we have national groups like American Battlefield Trust that bears basically the onus of purchasing commercial entities and returning the ground to the public or turning it back over to the park. But at that time in the 70s, it was the National Park Service that was basically funding the operations. I remember when they took over the Battlefield Motel in the 70s. For a short time, they actually had students that were working at the park. I think they bought it in 1970, and volunteers were staying at the Battlefield Motel they were taking care of the battlefield before they tore it down. So it's set in the field just north of the Sherfy farm, and you can see. So it was right on the Emmitsburg Road. There's a good view of it with the Sherfy farm in the background. One is painted white. And I have friends that collect match packs. I do not collect match packs. But my friend has like virtually every motel match pack around Gettysburg. You think that's a thing, not a thing that people do that, but they do. And here's a good view of it. And you can see the Sherfy house back there in the background. And it's one of the monuments in front of the Sherfy house made the 57th Pennsylvania. And you can see where the motel complex is. Oh, see the tower in the background. And one thing about it, even the Sherfy house, which was owned by the Falkenroths, was an accommodation for tourists. And the Falkenroths also owned the Battlefield Motel. They have a nice dog, don't they? And just for here, this is the Sherfy cherry tree with the cannonball on it that we have downstairs. So after the tree came down, they put a canopy on there, and they had it for a while. I saw a photograph of it, and it was like they had fencing around it, so you couldn't actually get to the cannonball and touch it. But they had it on display there. It must have been at that site until the 40s or the 50s, when it was finally removed and eventually donated to the Historical Society. But you know what I remember being a kid is all the signage. There's the Sherfy farm, and this is just south of it. All the signage along the highways. There were signs everywhere on the battlefield. So the battlefield really, it really has come a long way. And when we talk about signs next to monuments, look at that. And of course, this is advertising the Stuckey's. I thought, I know it's not a motel, but I threw it in there because the Stuckey's is right in the middle of the battlefield on the peach orchard property. So, if you ever hear somebody say it's commercialized today, there's nothing like Gettysburg commercialized. In the 60s and 70s, it was a lot of commercialization. I do not know where this is. I think that this is called the Peach Orchard Motel, and this is the only photograph I have of it from 1955 from this Phyllis Cleveland. It must be like behind Stuckey's. That's all I can figure. Just down the road past the Peach Orchard, if you're riding towards Emmitsburg on the right, was the Lee Mead Inn and cottages. And it's right on the Gettysburg battlefield. They tell you that. And they had cottages, and they had a cafeteria. I think they had a room with a lounge in it. I think it was called the Panorama Room at one point. But got lots of postcards of the Lee Mead Inn. And I got a really nice brochure of the Lee Mead Inn and cottages that tells a little bit of the history of the area. So you can come and stay here. And of course, this is from the 1940s. You see the peace light on it. This is a view of it from the Confederate Tower on the Seminary Ridge, the Eisenhower Tower. So we're looking at the back side of it in the Emmitsburg Road, and you can see the cottages, and you can kind of see where we're talking about it being located. And then one of my favorites of all time, I have this postcard. I haven't been able to find this name mentioned in the newspaper. I'm sure it's a Pennsylvania Dutch thing, don't you think? So this would be the Haynes restaurant later, this back building. We're right at where Pinchgut, or where West Confederate Avenue crosses into South Confederate Avenue near the Arkansas and Texas monuments. But there you go. Just beyond that, on the right, where the field is leading back to the Eisenhower farm, we had the Carolina Motel. And a lot of these complexes along this stretch were removed by the National Park Service in the 1970s. And, it just makes such a big difference in our appreciation of the battlefield. Can you imagine when you came here, and when I came here when I was a kid, and just all these signs and restaurants and motels up and down the battlefield, main battlefield road. So here's the Rose Garden Tea Room and Cottages. And I love this postcard. And this is, you can see where the tower is. This is right on the Emmitsburg Road, right at the Eisenhower farm. This would be like the entrance to the Eisenhower farm. And we're just south of. So we're basically across from the South End Guide Station where there are restrooms. This is some of the postcards are made by the companies themselves that they're not the best quality of postcard. But here's a close-up of the Rose Garden Tea Room. There's a great article in the newspaper that the day that Ike and Mamie decided to buy the Eisenhower farm, they had lunch here at the Rose Garden Tea Room. And, people didn't know when they were eating there that they had just made arrangements to purchase the property directly behind it. I guess that would be in November 1950. Maybe it was October when they came out to look at properties in 1950. And here's one of my prized postcards. Isn't that neat? How about those cottages? Would you stay in the cottage? It's like a motel room, right? Yeah. And then here's this picture, again, is by Phyllis Cleveland. What great stuff, huh? And if we go down the Emmitsburg Road farther, I took out the campgrounds. I'm passing over the campgrounds there, and, it hurts me because, I was going to show you Jellystone Campground was on the Emmitsburg Road for a while. But the Perfect Rest down the Emmitsburg Road on the way to the Eisenhower Inn. And got a bunch of postcards of that. I think I may have stayed there one time when we were younger. I somewhere along there. I have no idea where this is. The Banner Motel. I don't know if it's set where the Perfect Rest is. It gives the directions about the same distance, or if it's a little different location. Because I know it's not down Stewart's Motel is the next one a little bit farther, 4 or 5 miles, it says here. But this one opened up in 1954. And this one's still standing. Barely. So Stewart's Motel. And here's a nice view of it. And, to give you a point of reference, there's the Rider's Edge Yamaha dealer. And what's that? Barley Greenmount? Is that okay? Barley Greenmount Road. Yes. And so here you get, look at the big sign, air condition. That seems important, doesn't it? We don't have the name up in a big sign. We have air condition. And then eventually that became the Western Inn. And the Western Inn was still there, like until a couple months ago, And I don't know if you noticed, that side has just like fallen down. It's like hanging off. Okay, not in good shape at all. So, again, here's what I think about the motels in the area. I think they were mostly built to take advantage of the large crowds that were going to come to Gettysburg for the centennial of the Civil War. So for the most part, the motels are built in the 50s or the early 60s, and they did take advantage of the centennial of the Civil War and the tourism afterwards, but they're not built to last. They were not designed to last. So today, they're in horrible shape if they still exist, or they have been refurbished and repurposed for another reason. So it doesn't upset me. I see people on Facebook get so angry. Yeah, why did they tear that down? Well, because it was not built to last 50 years and it's fallen apart, and nobody wants to put a ton of money into rebuilding it. I mean, I don't look at it's a natural course. I don't look at it as evil that were tearing down all these old sites. They weren't built to last. You know what? If we didn't want them tearing down, we should have made stricter rules about how they were built when they were built, and we didn't. So anyway, that's my thought for the day. So I put in here, you don't really need the Sheraton Inn or the International Village, and it became the Ramada Inn, and then it became the Eisenhower Inn. That's actually more of a hotel complex, don't you think? And then there's this thing, the Ben Now Motel. I do not remember it. And it was here from 1952 to 1959. Well, not only do I not remember it, I can't tell you where this was. I'm sure some of you might remember it. It's probably the one off the Tonytown Road, Harper's Hill. We're probably down near the intersection of, we're probably near the fireworks place, down at the Emmitsburg Road and the Route 15. And I'm sure, Harper's Hill looks much like Round Top. So, but I couldn't tell you along the stretch of the road where that is. Maybe it's where the car dealership is, or the junkyard. Yeah, car auction. That's a better term for it. Somebody's going to watch this and say, we don't have a junkyard. So here's one of my postcards. That was my postcard I had of it. And this is the back of the postcard that describes where it is. And then this is Phyllis Cleveland's note when she went to talk to people. She put a note on this one. Do you like that? So how would you pronounce it? Banal? Why did they put a hyphen in it? Banal. Oh, there you go. Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe it's a couple that owned it. And then this says it's 7 miles. So I'm confused. If that's only 5 miles, this is 7. Oh, you know what? This could quite possibly be the site today that we call the Freedom Inn. Do you know where that is? The Freedom Motel in Greenmount. Yeah, because it says it's 7 miles, the blue and gray cabins. And that my brother took a photograph of that sign. We have a photograph of that sign, and I still don't know where that sign was, but he took a photograph of it. It was fallen down, but it's near Bullfrog Road. It's on that side of the road, on the west side of the Emmitsburg Road, near Bullfrog Road, the blue and gray cabins. So let's talk a little bit about Route 30, a couple things I wanted to mention. The Larsons. Of course, I'm sure you guys, no way you guys would know this. I worked for Andy Larson for a while. He gave me meaningful employment. And I loved Andy Larson. And you probably know he died just a few years ago in his 90s. He was a member of the Historical Society here since our founding. So he was one of the founding members. And his family, Eric Larson, his father, owned a house on top of Seminary Ridge. This house is across from, it's right where the Lee's headquarters would be off to the left here. But it stood right there. They tore it down and built a restaurant, the Dutch Pantry. That's another, you can play that game. Lee's Family Restaurant, the High Point on Seminary Ridge, JD's Grill, Muldoon's, then the Appalachian Brewery. I think I got them all. So, okay. He built cabins, Eric Larson. And you can see the main house, which you could stay in, and then there were cabins. And I got to show you this. So here is a postcard that I got. Now, Andy, he would tell me like stories, like I know so many crazy stories from him. Maybe I'll tell a couple tonight if you come out to our program tonight we have out there, but at Lee's headquarters. But one story he told me was that they took down the cabins slowly, and then they replaced them with sections of the motel. So it's not all one big piece. It was built in sections. And as they tore down the cabins, they sold them. And a couple of them, people bought the whole section and then moved it to their property and lived in it. And he told me where one of them was one time. And I was like, yeah. I got this postcard, and I remembered it. I was like, wow. So should I tell you where it is, or can you find it? You got to go past the Peace Light on the Mummersburg Road, about a mile. It's on your right before you get to Belmont Road. But there's no doubt. They added on to it all. But can you imagine just picking up one of those cabins and moving it and making a house out of it? Now it's a bigger cabin than I imagined. I guess it's 2 cabins. Oh, yeah, you're probably right. It probably is 3. Yeah, they probably used that centerpiece too as a different thing. But this is, they tore down the cottages and they built the motel. Originally, the Larson family only owned the Gettysburg side of the hill, and a guy named Clyde Daly owned Lee's headquarters and the western side of the hill. But eventually the Larsons bought out Clyde Daly, and then they had the whole property there. And they had a huge enterprise there for many, many years. They're very successful. Now, I mentioned the Shields Museum, and I skipped over some, I don't have images or postcards or stuff on every motel. I just wanted to mention some, but way out Route 30, 6 miles from Gettysburg, I remember it pretty well, but there was Wayne's Motor Court. Do you remember that? I'd put this one in here, I forgot. In McKnightstown, there were cabins, and I don't know much about them, except we have a business card by them and a photo. But there's another Wayne's motel. It's basically out where the dollar store is now, right in that area. Or just beyond that, I think, maybe. But here's another picture of it. Oh, boy, I have a lot on Wayne's Motor Court. I don't know why. And then, when you get towards Caledonia, there were a ton of campgrounds and businesses and hotels. And Kane's campground and cabins was out there. And I think they in their advertisement, they have Kane's Cabins, and the cabins is spelled with a K. But there was one called Colonel's Creek. There was a lot of campgrounds and cabins out of Caledonia. And that made sense because, near the state park and in the mountains. Oh, I put the Mummersburg Road in here. Of course, I wanted to put the Peace Light Inn. I didn't get in great detail, but the Peace Light Inn had cabins around it. And I think off the top of my head, it was 1979. Let me look at my notes. 1987. I have here, wait a minute. Yeah, March, it was in March of 1979 where there was a fire and the Peace Light Inn burned down. And the cabin stood there for a while, but eventually the Park Service got it and took the cabins down. I don't know if people remember, but they actually moved the Peace Light Inn, and it opened as a restaurant on Route 30 near where Marshall's is, like Ruby Tuesdays is. And it was there for like a year or two. The Peace Light Inn being out on Route 30. But then the Warners owned that, I remember. And then, Carlisle Street has a bunch of motels on it. So we got the Colonial Motel. And these motels all opened up in the 1950s. Again, these were all opened up to mostly they were opened up to, this is 1960, to provide, places for people to stay who were in town for the centennial of the Civil War. So 1960. See, I think when people look at photographs like his postcard, they're like, well, it's 1960. There must be 1960s cars in it. No. Just like, we drive 1990s cars around here today, they're, look at all the cars there. They're not 60s cars, they're 50s cars or 40s cars. They're Criterion. I always found it interesting. I wonder, the Criterion, or is that how would you guys would pronounce it? That's the bar where Watson met Sherlock Holmes or had a drink. Oh, that's where he met a friend, Watson, who then took him to meet Sherlock Holmes, something like that. And in London, there's like a sign on that bar telling you that. So I wonder why they named it the Criterion. These are on Carlisle Street. The College Motel, and there's another view of it looking across the street from the Heckman's Battery, and the Lincoln Motor Lodge. So let me tell you this: the Colonial, the Criterion, the College Motel, the Lincoln Motor Lodge or the Travel Lodge, and the Lamppost. Those 5 locations were purchased by Gettysburg College in 2002. And their dormitories for Gettysburg College, all 5 of those businesses. So I find it interesting to talk to people about this subject because I'll get 2 very different conflicting opinions. One people will be like, wow, we had these 5 really run-down businesses in town that were going to get ready to be torn down or demolished, and the college stepped in and refurbished them, and today they stand in all their former glory. And other people will be, the college stole these properties and ripped the taxes from our tax rolls. So some people are happy about it, and some people are angry about it. But isn't that interesting? 5 properties along Carlisle Street, 4 of them that were motels and 1 that was a really nice restaurant that everybody loved, are now college dormitories. So there's the Lincoln Motor Lodge, which then later became the Travel Lodge. Okay. Do you see this guy here? Do you know the Travel Lodge has a mascot? And Alana had to tell me this. His name is Sleepy. Sleepy with a hat. And guess what? Do you know there was a day in Gettysburg where Sleepy came? Don't you wish you would have known about that and you could meet him while he was here? That is just creepy, let me tell you. I'm sure my kids would want to see him. Okay, so if you go farther out the Carlisle Road, you probably know if you go all the way up onto Keckler's Hill, we refer to it as, there were a couple large motels. The Rainbow Motel that eventually became the Gettysburg Inn, and what is the other one? The other one's called the North Ridge, and it went through a bunch of successive names, but we have some pictures of the Rainbow Motel. Again, my Joe, if he watches this with his match packs, I give him some credit for his match packs. And then eventually, like I said, it became the Gettysburg Inn. And this one was called the Rest a Night Motel. And you see it had a nice place out back there. And I have some stuff on that. I think this is the one that is called the North Ridge at the moment. I didn't put a postcard of that in there. And then if you go farther out towards Biggerville, of course, we have the Blue Sky Motel, which is still there. So look at their classy looking buildings then. Okay. Now the Harrisburg Road. Again, Harrisburg Road is one of those roads that had lots and lots and lots of motels. The Suburban Motel. So the Suburban Motel was at the base of Barlow's Knoll. And thinking it's put up in the 1960s. Let me see. 1960 I have for it. The Suburban Motel. And I knew the guy who owned this hotel for many years after he sold it. So that was built right up against the base of Barlow's Knoll, and the park purchased that hotel from him. And so you can't see where it was anymore. But he was an interesting guy. The guy I knew that owned it, I can't even think of his last name anymore. But he had an antique shop downtown for a while. 30 modern units there. And across the street was Foreman's Motel. I think this one only had like 8 rooms in it in its heyday. So, and I'm not exactly sure where this was, if it was on this side of Rock Creek or if it's just on the other side of Rock Creek on the right, where the modern development is. But there was this place called Foreman's Motel. I think it was across from the Horse and Buggy Museum. That was, and then this one's called the Willow Grove or the Willows. It was called the Willows Motel, a little bit farther out on the right. You might know farther up, this one still stands, the Stockholm Motel, and I think they're using it as a rental facility, so people rent the various motel rooms and live in it. And I think this is you know what? That's the Stockholm advertisement, but that's actually John's Motel. And again, it still stands. If you go out to Harrisburg Road and look, there's a few of these old motels that are still standing that are all being used as rental units. I think this one still stands. This is like the Dud, D-U-D, Dud B Manor Motel. Figure that one out. But that one still stands. And then, of course, we mentioned the Cleveland Motel. Beautiful and modern in 1950s. And that one, most people remember that one and that one being torn down. Okay, so I want to talk to you about Route 30. So I didn't pick every street. Like I said, for some reason, there's not a lot of motels along the Baltimore Turnpike. There, of course, was the Travel Lodge behind the Stonehenge or Big Boppers or whatever you want to call it. Again, there's a place you can come up with a bunch of names. Bankerts, it was called. Lincoln Social. That'll be an easier one to get and more modern. And what's the sign say now? What was it before Lincoln Social? Savorhood. So you have to remember these names. But I liked Big Boppers, I think is the one I liked. Am I forgetting one? I'm sure I am. But, obviously we have the Holiday Inn Express and we have the Comfort Inn and the Days Inn in that little plaza on Route 30. But, before that strip was developed, there were motels along it that all got torn down. McCoy's Motel. Look at that. I love that little advertisement for it. And that was called something else before that. That was called Bigley's Motel from 1965 until it turned into McCoy's Motel. And I have that postcard with that little guy on it. And I don't know if you can see, he's right there. That's the sign there, and he's right there standing on the sign there. And the motel, and of course Joe has a match pack from it. But here he is here. I kind of blew this up just so you can kind of see where it is. And then this became the Penn Eagle Motel. And what I really, really like about this, and that could be my family station wagon right there. That's what we drove around in. Look, there's like the tour center van picking up people. But look here. Looky here. So there's Natural Springs Road, and here's Natural Springs Park, which became a mobile home park. And then eventually, this is the giant grocery store right here. And so that's where this is. Remember they moved Natural Springs Road slightly over here? Do you remember that? And this all got torn down. And I guess we're looking down at like the Arby's is like right here. I think this is where the modern road goes in. So, to give you an idea, isn't it wild to see? I'm always looking at battlefield photographs and looking at today and then and nows, but I don't do it as much in my own life. Like, what used to be here when I was a kid and what does it look like now? That to me is wild. Okay, maybe it's just too much for me. And there's just a little farther up, and I think this stretch of this building still stands as, or another motel unit stands on that, the Lincoln Way East Motel. And I don't honestly remember where this is at all. I'm guessing we're like at Walmart. You know, there was something at Walmart. So we're somewhere just up near Walmart. The Highway Manor Motel. So if anybody remembers where it is, you know, I should look at some aerial photographs. So we do have some, and I can compare some of these and figure it out. I have a lot of motels, and I got to tell you, it's not my main job, so I haven't done like research on every one of them. But here's a nice photograph of the Highway, what's again? Highway Manor Motel. And there's another color photograph of it. And as we go farther out Route 30, and I skipped over a few that I don't have images of, but here's Oak Park Cabins. Now it says 3.5 miles east of the city limits. I do not know where this was, although I have this really, really early postcard and it tells you Oak Park Cabins and Restaurant. And you can see there's a restaurant building, and we're looking down into the cabins. I was thinking, but Earl's is a little farther out. So this is 3.5 miles. So it's before Earl's. No, that's even farther than Earl, isn't it? Maybe it's a little before you get to Earl. Okay, yeah, not that far though. Good, you guys. Yeah, I guess I just need to like try to see where 3.5 miles is. They don't have addresses. That's the problem. Yeah, at that time they don't have addresses. I don't know when they started having addresses. They're just called like RD3. You know what I mean? Yeah. But eventually they do. And then it makes it much easier for me. Whether that happens in the 60s or the 70s. But there, what do you think of that? There's the cabins at Oak Park Cabins. Now this one, see, here's the Lorraine. Okay, so this says 3 miles. So I know where this is. So wow. That other place is out near the Sunken Gardens a little bit. But Deluxe Cottages. What's that? No. I'll show you what it looks like today. Here, look at the building there, and see the little gas station in front? And I took a picture of it. Here's where the gas station is, right here, and that's the same building. It's still there, and it's beyond. It's right before you get to the trading post on the left, if you know where that is, or the road to the junkyard. But the Lorraine, and my friends, they love collecting these postcards. And look, does that say restaurant? Wow. So they have a restaurant there too. And then here is, I thought I had more I put into it, but here's, there's the Lorraine. See, modern cabins, 3 miles east of Gettysburg. Oh, and then I got them some out of order. This is Edgewood. I think this is the Edgewood. So the Edgewood, again, the Edgewood started as cabins in 1952, and then they built a motel. And this thing still stands. And this was directly across from Earl's, since we were up Earl's Inn. See it? See it right there. Yeah, there's a flea market sometimes in front of it. I think calling it a flea market is being generous. And then here's another one, Clyde Simpson, Elm Court Motel. I don't know where it is, somewhere 3 miles east of Gettysburg. And then I wanted to end our program with Herrick's Sunken Gardens. The Herrick family had some cabins there early on. Let me see what I have for the cabins. The cabins were there by 1938, or 1930. And in 1935, they opened up the Sunken Gardens. And, a couple times recently, I looked over to see if I could see any of these buildings, and you can't really see them anymore. But when I was a kid, you would look over and you see exactly this view of the cabins. And again, this says 4.5 miles east of Gettysburg. So this is a little bit farther out. So when we say, I don't know when it said 3.5 miles, I still don't know where that Oak Park Cabins is. But I get lots of postcards of this. I love these aerial photograph postcards. And right here, the entrance here, that house still stands. There's a sign here, and I think it's Sheeler's. Yeah, Sheeler's. Yeah. And you can see, but most of it went back, and the cabins were back there. And you can kind of see where this still comes out. And then right over here, this is the parking lot for the Lincoln Logs. And this is the railroad. There's the railroad tracks. So you get an idea. Isn't that a great aerial postcard? And then here's another postcard of it. It's not looking that nice in that one. But here you go. I love this one. The AAA, the Sunken Gardens. I have no idea when it closed. I was never on that property when it was open as a hotel. So I have it closing in like 1963. It must have been open longer than that. My problem is, how do I figure out when something closes? I look the last time it appears in the newspaper advertising. But sometimes people don't advertise it in the newspaper. Okay, so there's Sunken Gardens. Beautifully landscaped grounds with large single and family-size units. You see, you can rent a whole little house for your whole family and put up a whole bunch of people in there. And they had a swimming pool, air-conditioned playground. Oh, horseshoe court. That would be a seller for me. Yeah. Yeah. And so Glenn and Irene Toot. And here's what's really interesting. You see that building right there? In that what must be a 1940s postcard. Here it's in this postcard too, in a color photograph. And there's the house that still stands at the location. I don't know if they have the big high porch on it. And the swimming pool is not very big, I don't think, but there's a swimming pool. And of course, here you go. Here's another aerial view of it from a postcard. For a little place, they had a lot of postcards. And I don't know if you can see, there's the roof of the Lincoln Logs. And it's right across the street from the Lincoln Logs. And, I ate at the Lincoln Logs restaurant a bunch of times. I don't know if I don't have it in my notes here, but, that was obviously open into the early 90s, maybe, the Lincoln Logs. Anybody remember? I'm sure it was in the 90s. What I guess, for my money, I'm from Baltimore. They had steamed crabs there, and the steamed crabs were pretty good there. Yeah, yeah. And people, I know they had a place downstairs where they had dancing, so you could go dancing there. And one of my friends had a band when we were kids, and his band played there all the time. Greg Christensen, if anybody remembers him. Anybody remember his band? He had two bands, Fist and Fear Itself. Good. I shout out to him if he watches the video. He loves this stuff. And he liked the Lincoln Logs. So there's it today. I took a picture of it off of Google Maps so you could see it. It's still there. The sign is still there. You had to drive around down behind it and park below. Do you remember? You really didn't. You really didn't park out front. But now they turned it. Why did they cover up the logs with these horrible stones? Okay, but that's the Lincoln Logs. And I have a bunch of postcards from the Lincoln Logs, and they sold a series of postcards there they just stamped them. I guess you could buy them, in bulk and just stamp them with your location. And I have a bunch of different ones. Well, thanks for listening to me talk about motels.